Meet the new One Expert. Redesigned and improved to cater your needs. Developed by the Department of Science and Technology, One Expert is a one-stop portal for your S&T needs and requests. Search for an expert. With a database of S&T experts, One Expert allows you to search them by name, location, expertise, or affiliation. Apply for consultancy or training online. One Expert is your online link to DOST's consultancy and training programs related to manufacturing productivity, food safety, agriculture and aquaculture productivity, and energy management. Learn from a series of free webinars from the comfort of your home. Brought to you by our lineup of experts, Expert O or Experts Online comes up with interesting and informative webinars exploring the field of science, technology, and innovation. Post your inquiries at One Expert Opportunities. Inquiries posted on this page are visible to all registered experts as well as DOST personnel nationwide. Get access to relevant science and technology-related materials and resources through DOST SCII's publication bridge and its online library, Starbucks. Download our mobile applications now. One Expert PH, One Expert Lite, and most importantly, One Chat. This messaging platform aims to connect clients to experts and DOST staff with ease. To enjoy all these features, create your One Expert account now at www.oneexpert.gov.ph. Be part of this growing science and technology community.
Mic check. Good. Copy. Mic check. Yeah. Okay. Please. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Department of Science and Technology Regional Office X in partnership with the Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center webinar entitled Innovative Technologies in Improving Aquaculture's Practices. May we remind everyone, except for the speaker and moderator, to be on listen-in mode by putting your microphone on mute. Refrain from making unnecessary sound or visual that may disrupt the presentation. Thank you. Very clear. Ang audio ko. again, everyone. Magandang umaga po sa lahat or maayong aga sa tanan. Welcome to the webinar entitled Innovative Technologies in Improving Aquaculture Practices, brought to you by the Department of Science and Technology Regional Office 6 in partnership with Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center. I am Julius Ramar Gambiota of the Department of Science and Technology Regional Office 6, providing S&T service in Western Visayas, and I am your moderator for today. Before we start, may we request Ms. Noveline Ann Patuar, Science Research Specialist 1 of DOST Region 6, to lead the prayer.
Okay, let us pray. So, our Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord God, for this day that you have given us. We thank you, Lord, for the good weather and for the participants, Lord God, and the resource speakers, as well as the facilitators that we have this morning. Lord, bless this activity, Lord God, that it can open opportunities to our client MSMEs. And we pray, Lord, that we will gain more viewers, and as well as we can accomplish our goals for today. We bless you, Lord, and we praise you for this morning's activity, and be with us, Lord God. Guide us always, guide our hearts, guide our minds, Lord God. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Ms. Noveline. To start, let us hear an opening message from the Aquaculture Department Chief of Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center, Mr. Dan Limbalyao. Sir.
Engineer. Erwin Hilonga, Dr. Emilian Flores. Engineer Erwin Hilonga, Dr. Emilian Flores, and the organizers of this webinar on innovative technologies in improving aquaculture practices. Good morning. Yes, I would like to tell you that since its establishment in 1973, the SIFDEC Aquaculture Department has generated and transferred sustainable aquaculture technologies to various stakeholders, not only in the Southeast Asian region, but also all over the world. Initially focusing on milkfish and shrimp, the commodities have greatly expanded to include other marine fin species such as sea bass, grouper, snapper, and pompano, and marine crustaceans such as mangrove crab and marine shrimps, mollusks and other invertebrates such as oysters, abalone, sea cucumber, and marine worms or polychaetes, plants such as seaweeds, as well as the freshwater species such as tilapia, carp, and freshwater prawn. For most of these commodities, we have published the results in several reference journals, written extension manuals, and commodity brochures, and featured them in local and national exhibitions, and conducted training courses and techno transfer activities whether in station, on-site, or online with various audiences ranging from technicians, entrepreneurs, and fisher folks to academics, extension workers, and policy makers. Until last year, we have been conducting techno transfer and capacity building activities using a combination of these modes of delivery. However, with the advent of COVID-19, travel restrictions and quarantine requirements have made it impossible to hold face-to-face interaction and on-site extension activities, which leaves one online mode of delivery as a feasible approach to transfer knowledge and skills, which almost all groups, including the education and business sectors, are willing to give a try. For AQD, since we are not new to the online platform, we only have to reprogram our activities to be compatible with this kind of knowledge delivery. To quote our development communication sections, learning, they said, cannot be quarantined. So today, as requested by DOST Region 6, We will be bringing you innovative technologies in improving aquaculture practices. In the webinar, our AQD experts will discuss milkfish culture and shrimp culture, culture of mangrove crab, reviving our native catfish, and nursery growout of pompano. Hence, in the middle of the pandemic, we shall continue working in a 100% workforce 5 days a week to fulfill our mandate of technology transfer and capacity building, hoping that after the smoke of the pandemic clears, our fish farmers and other stakeholders will be more than ever equipped in helping to move the economy forward. It is my pleasure, therefore, to welcome all of you to this webinar, and I am hoping that this interaction will be fun and fruitful. Thank you very much. Engineer Win Hilonga.
Thank you, sir. At this point, we would like to acknowledge our Google Meet participants as well as our viewers through the One Expert portal, to all participating MSMEs from different provinces in Western Visayas and other regions, and the interested stakeholders. It is our pleasure to have here with us today the directors of different regional offices, Engineer Rowan Arnolanga, Regional Director of DOST6, and Mr. Dan Lee Balyao, AQD Chief of CEFLEC. Thanks to everyone for positively responding to our invitation. This webinar is an initiative of DOST6 to help improve production of MSMEs in the fisheries, especially in the aquaculture sector, and aspiring entrepreneurs, as well as to showcase technologies and better practices developed by researchers from CEFLEC. These technologies and practices will provide for solutions to different problems encountered in culture of multi-species from nursery to grow-out operations. This activity is also in line with the celebration of Farm Security Month every August by virtue of Proclamation Number 115-A, Series of 1966, which seeks to propagate safety consciousness among Filipino people. According to Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, aquaculture in the Philippines has a long history and involves many species and farming practices in diverse ecosystems. Most of the production comes from the farming of seaweed, milkfish, tilapia, carp, shrimp, oyster, and mussel. Aquaculture contributes significantly to the country's food security and employment and foreign exchange earnings. Aquaculture is growing much faster than capture fisheries. However, the global position of the Philippines in aquaculture production has fallen steadily from fourth place in 1985 to 12th place today. The Philippines now contributes only a little over 1% of global farm fish production compared to 5% previously. However, the onset of COVID-19 pandemic and enhanced quarantine measures has resulted to economic recession and was experienced globally. In Region 6, every business establishments and individuals struggle for health as well as economic survival. The Filipino spirit of resiliency in times of adversity like this leads us to explore various sources of income, such as selling food products to neighbors and community as well. With this foregoing, the Department of Science and Technology Regional Office 6 initiated a series of webinars with focus on improving aquaculture technologies and practices. These practices will definitely help improve the industry and the economic status of the community as well. DOST's initiative on webinar aims to bring science and technology practitioners closer to our community and to customers and help them recover and improve their aquaculture businesses. Before we begin, we just have few reminders for all. For maximum webinar experience, we would like to remind everyone of our webinar house rules. Except for the speaker and moderator, be on listen-in mode, by putting your microphone on mute. Refrain from making unnecessary sound or visual that may disrupt the presentation. Reserve your questions during the open forum. Participants attending via Google Meet may ask their questions directly to the speaker after they have been recognized by the moderator. Those attending via One Expert may send their questions through the webinar chat window by clicking the Submit as a Question box and hitting Send. Please use the following format when asking questions. Name of your institution, your question, followed by name of the expert to whom you address your question. To get a certificate, complete the evaluation form after the webinar. The link to the form will be provided during the latter part of the webinar. Thank you. And at this point, I think we are ready to move on to the next part of this webinar. I hope everyone is comfortable and excited to hear these SafTech developed technologies or practices, because at this point, we will meet our first speaker. Our first speaker graduated from the University of the Philippines in the Visayas, Bachelor of Science Inland Fisheries in 1978, and took his Master of Science degree in Inland Fisheries in 1984. He spent over 30 years of experience in intensive and semi-intensive shrimp production. He is an expert in all aspects of farm management and production of Pineus monodon, Pineus vaname, Pineus indicus, and Pineus tylerostris shrimp species, including the freshwater prawn. His extensive knowledge and experience in milkfish, tilapia, and grouper production. He is also has a broad knowledge and experience in offshore cage culture of lobsters. Ladies and gentlemen, to present milkfish and shrimp culture, let us welcome Mr. Victor Emmanuel J. Estilo.
Good morning, everyone. My topic this morning is on milkfish culture and shrimp culture, and I'll try to share with you some important updates and significant tips in order for us to improve most of our aquaculture practices in the culture of milkfish and shrimp. I would like to begin by showing you this infographic that contains the information of our total fisheries production performance last year, 2019. We can see from here that the total fisheries production we had increased by 1.5%. And from the different subsectors, aquaculture posted an increase of 1.5%, or rather 2.3%, to 2.36 million metric tons. This represents 53% of total fisheries production. So aquaculture now takes a major share in the total fisheries production of the country. And further down, looking at the different species, milkfish production increased by 2.7%, or rather 3.7%, to about 415,000 metric tons. And this is due to the higher stocking rates that have been adopted, and then the availability of stocking materials, less weather disturbance in the past year. With regards to tiger prawn production, an increase of 2.5% was recorded to a total of about 46,000 metric tons. This is also due to less weather disturbance and adherence by our shrimp farmers to biosecurity and best aquaculture practice protocols. Now, about 55% of our aquaculture production comes from brackishwater fish ponds, with freshwater fish ponds and marine cages contributing to about 23%. So, brackish water pond culture plays a significant role in the production of our aquaculture products. Milkfish culture takes place in different environments. First, we need to know that bangus is the traditional aquaculture product of the Philippines, and it is the most widely produced and consumed fish in the Philippines. It can filter, feed, and graze on plankton and complex benthic organisms and even filamentous algae. They can also adapt to feed on floating and sinking commercial pellets. They can be grown under different salinities from freshwater up to full-strength seawater. And that's why you can find bangus culture in freshwater fish pens, brackish water fish ponds, and marine offshore cages. It is not a piscivorous species, so it can be polycultured with other fin fishes and crustaceans. And what's nice about milkfish is it can stunt itself when overcrowded, yet exhibit compensatory growth when they are released in an environment with under a reduced density. Let me take you to the different milkfish culture systems that we have in our brackish ponds in the country. First is the extensive system. In this kind of culture system, no inputs are added, but the fish depends on natural food in the culture facility. And then these are the kind of food materials that are being brought in by tidal flow or during tidal exchange, such as plankton, detritus, and benthos. Under this culture system, water exchange depends on tidal fluctuation, and aeration is through natural diffusion. The second system of growing milkfish in ponds is through the semi-intensive method. And under this method, under this system, the fish are grown largely dependent on natural food, which is improved by fertilization and supplemented with commercial feeds to complement the availability of natural food, or in case natural food in the pond runs out. Water exchange is carried out through tidal fluctuation and sometimes through the use of pumps. Emergency aeration is also available. Then the last and third culture system of growing milkfish in brackish water ponds is through the intensive method. This method fully depends on nutritionally complete formulated diet that is added or that are added to the system, usually in dry pellet form or mash. The water exchange is conducted regularly, and aeration is also regular because under this system, stocking densities are normally high. The brackish water culture of milkfish has been going on for so many years already, and to date I can still see some very important aspects that we need to pay attention to, especially in site elevation. It is important for our pond bottoms to be situated in an elevation that would warrant the draining and filling of the pond during spring tide. So being a coastal fish pond, brackish water fish pond, tidal fluctuation is the main means of changing water in the pond. So these are this diagram shows the ideal elevation of our ponds when we need locate a new pond or build a new one. And also we don't want to repeat the errors of the past, the mistakes of the past, and that is through through the construction of these ponds on acid sulfate soils. This is a very difficult problem because reclamation takes a very long time and very expensive. So these two aspects I would like to emphasize: the location of our brackish water fish pond for milkfish culture. Okay, once we have started growing milkfish, we need to focus on natural food production. This is very important because right now I can see feeds being given even to fry and fingerlings, and that only shows that our fish farmers now cannot anymore maintain a luxuriant growth of our natural food, specifically lablab. I think the reason for that is the presence of snails, and most farmers will agree that it is difficult, if not impossible, to grow lablab when the pond is infested with snails. Nevertheless, let us hope that through intense drying of the ponds during summer, we can get rid of these pond snails and be able to produce sufficient natural food such that we can reduce the amount of feeds that we need to use in growing our fish. And talking about natural food, I'm referring to lablab, which is a macrobenthic community of blue-greens, diatoms, even nematodes, and zooplanktons. And these are the ideal, or this is the ideal natural food that we would like to see in our milkfish ponds, especially in the nursery areas. And not the what happened here, and not the what's wrong, and not the filamentous type. I mean the filamentous algae. Filamentous algae, as you know, is very high in cellulose, which has a very low nutritional value for the milkfish. And to determine whether we have filamentous algae or lablab in the pond is to grab a sample of that natural food and squeeze it in the palm of our hands, and if something remains there, that means we have filamentous algae. If it is lablab, then nothing remains in the palm of our hand once we squeeze it. Okay.
Another aspect I would like to emphasize is during fry stocking.
I think that, or I strongly suggest that early stocking be conducted during the early morning and not in the late afternoon. Both of these times give us cool weather to transport and to stock fry. However, the conditions that would happen in the ponds later after the fry are stocked is much better when we do stocking early in the morning. After stocking, meaning to say the temperature of the pond water improves, and so does the dissolved oxygen levels. And whereas if we stock at night, the stressed fry would have to contend with a decreasing dissolved oxygen level and a decreasing temperature in the pond water. So these would affect their survival levels, and that's why I strongly suggest that stocking should only be done early in the morning and not late in the afternoon. Second is the acclimation. Most cases, acclimation is conducted in a haphazard manner. You know, random splashing of water in the plastic bags like that. So I suggest the use of a dipper so we can achieve uniform volume of dilution in each bag. Therefore, acclimation is conducted uniformly in all the bags, and this would result to a much better survival when all of the parameters in the bag, the same as the pond water, because of the uniform dilution. Since now, another thing is now most of our fry comes from the hatchery, we can always synchronize the salinity of the fry bag with the salinity of the pond. And it is best that we send a sample of our pond water to the hatchery so they can take a look at the salinity and therefore make adjustments such that the salinity difference should not be more than 5 ppt the moment that we stock the fry in our ponds.
I think that's all I can share with you with respect to milkfish culture. Our time here is limited, and let me proceed now with shrimp culture.
Shrimp culture also is an industry that have been started in Western Visayas way back in the middle 90s. And this is through the extensive method. However, in the early 80s, after SIFDEC has closed the life cycle of Pineus monodon, the industry has become more organized. And at the time, we were stocking our ponds with monodon at PL 1820. The age of the PLs was 18 to 20, PL 20, and the stocking density was 15 to 20 PLs per square meter. We had this production production figures. The culture period was up to 140 days. And we got between 3.6 to 6.3 tons per hectare. The ponds we used were plankton-based. I mean, the culture system, the growout system was plankton-based. So meaning we grew plankton first before we stocked the PLs. The water exchange was between 10 to 20% daily. Size of the ponds was from 0.5 to 1 hectare. We used earthen ponds with double concrete sluice gates, one for filling the pond and the other for draining water. The feed we used were commercial pellets, and sometimes we add fresh feeds. Paddle wheel aeration was in the form of standard paddle wheels. Now, we were able to enjoy this period of good production, such that big companies have adopted this kind of farming in large scales. And like any industry, aqua industry or agri-industry, diseases would usually catch up with our production. And at the time, the first disease that was recorded was MBV, followed by IHHNV, or infectious hypodermal hematopoietic necrosis virus. Then we had the yellowhead virus in Thailand, the Taura syndrome virus in Ecuador and the Americas, and the white spot syndrome virus, which first appeared in China in 1992 and spread rapidly around Asia and eventually to the rest of the world. So what did we do? We found out that post larvae that we're using appeared to be contaminated already with the pathogens, because the parents where we get these post larvae are caught from the wild. And that's when the culture of Pacific white shrimp, or Lithopineus vannamei, started or became popular, because vannamei is a domesticated species, and the post larvae that we produce are from clean broodstock. Thus, the PLs we're using were disease-free. At the time, we were using PL 10 to 14, stocked at 60 to 100 PLs per square meter. The survival rates were 80 to 90%. The harvest weight are smaller compared to monodon, 12 to 18 grams, but the production were much higher, 5.7 to 16.2 tons in a culture period of roughly the same, 90 to 130 days. The system we used was still plankton-based. We rely on the plankton to maintain the water quality for the growth of our PLs, and water exchange was also a routine matter daily at 10 to 20%. The area of the ponds remained the same, since these are the same ponds that were used before growing monodon, later adapted to grow vannamei. The pond structure are still the same also, earthen dikes with double concrete sluice gates, and only commercial pellets were used in vannamei growout systems, and no fresh feeds were introduced. Aeration requirements were much higher due to higher stocking densities and higher biomass. Thus, aside from standard paddle wheels, we employed the use of long-arm paddle wheels at the time.
This method became popular. I mean, the species became popular, and so were the farming methods and the pond designs, including recirculating systems.
But still, the disease problem persisted, primarily white spot syndrome virus. Two new diseases cropped up: the early mortality syndrome, or the acute hepatopancreatic necrosis syndrome, happens. And then another one, the hepatopancreatic necrosporidiosis, which is caused by a mycosporidian, the enterocytosome hepatopinae. More problems occurred for us in the shrimp industry or in the shrimp farming sector, that we tried to look into how we can manage risk in or disease risk in a farming system. And the first step, of course, is for us to understand that the within the same environment there are the cultured animals and the pathogens, and environmental conditions can become favorable for the pathogens to develop a disease situation. And so a holistic approach was developed, involving the exclusion and control of pathogens, regular health monitoring of the cultured animals, and then genetic performance of the species. We also looked into how to create a more adequate and stable water in the growout system in terms of parameters, physico-chemical parameters, and the feeds were also improved. But more importantly is the husbandry of the animal, and we started to focus on animal comfort. Taking animal comfort in mind, here in Iloilo, we plotted the temperature patterns and the rainfall patterns. And we found that in this graph, which we generated, I think, last year, 2019, we found that in the months of June until about November, the fluctuation in temperature is just a little over a degree compared to when the months of December comes, and these temperatures are much lower than 27 degrees centigrade. It has been shown that the virulence of the white spot virus increases as temperature goes below 27 degrees centigrade. So we were looking into this window, or we call this a season, and we organized something to demonstrate how to grow Vaname in this particular period of time, incorporating the following interventions. Okay, so we in the farm, we have to re-engineer the entire farming area, where we constructed decontamination stations and tire bath stations, biosecurity fence, bird scare devices, and all the works that would help exclude the pathogen from the farming area. We also identified sources of high health larvae from SPF broodstocks, and incorporated probiotics in our farming or in our culture environment. We decided that it's going to be a minimum to zero water exchange process to totally exclude pathogens coming from the wild that comes with the pumped water. And this needs to be augmented with a biofloc system, where we can take full advantage of microbial process of converting wastes into or reutilizing the wastes of the shrimps inside the pond into something more beneficial to the organisms. And then we developed a detailed disease surveillance and monitoring system to give us feedback on the health of the cultured organisms. We also incorporated in the design of the pond a sludge removal facility, which is an improvement of the center drain design that we used during the days of monodon culture. And we conducted this at the Brackishwater Culture Center of CIFDEC at Dumangas. We stocked at 60 PLs per square meter using PL10 or PL11. The survival rate we got was 97%. Now, these are the results, by the way, of the demonstration. And we harvested an average body weight of 21.3 grams. We started harvesting at the OC18, and after 13 partial harvests, the final weight we got was 26 grams. So on average, we got 21.3 grams. Our production amounted to about 12.8 tons, and for a period of 80 to 135 days. The growout system is heterotrophic, meaning to say not anymore plankton, but composed of microbes. Water exchange was 0%. We never changed water the entire duration of the 135 days culture. There were additions of rainwater though, as these months are known known to be the wet months of the year, and based on what you show earlier in the graph, where we have this elevated rainfall pattern. The pond area was roughly 1 hectare. The pond structure, we used old earthen ponds, earthen bottom ponds. These are old ponds, but the sides are lined with HDPE. We use commercial pellets, and for aeration, we use standard paddle wheels at 16 horsepower per hectare. So they're quite high requirement for aeration. And these are the production results we got. Is the production data. We conducted 9 partial harvests, starting at the OC81 until the OC131 for one pond, and the OC82 until the OC127 for the other pond. Here are the production figures. The FCR we got was an average of 1.38. The production per hectare is 12.2 tons per hectare. And looking at its economic, looking at the economics of the exercise, we found that when those interventions were included, we were able to successfully produce Pinayos Baname even in old earthen ponds. And mind you, by the way, the average depth of our water there was only about 82 and 79 centimeters. Because these are old earthen ponds, and since we don't conduct water exchange, that was the levels. Our salinity ranged from 32 at stocking, and when we harvested the ponds, our salinity was down to 12. That is through the addition of rainwater. So that exercise gave us a net profit of about 1.3 million from the 12 or so tons of shrimp that we produced. Okay, let me end this presentation with another infographic. For the first quarter of this year, our total fisheries production is now down to 3.2%. All subsectors showed negative production. However, milkfish, as one of the major species that we're producing, showed a positive increase of 0.8%. And that is very good news, because even Western Visayas, as one of the top producing regions, also registered a positive growth or increase. So even with this pandemic, and even with this present disruption in the supply chain, we here in Western Visayas, we were still able to show a positive growth in our aquaculture production. And I hope, sincerely hope, that what I shared with you this morning can improve the sustainability of this production in our brackish water ponds especially. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Estilo. Everyone, please reserve your questions during the open forum. You may also send it now through chat box, and our technical person will take note of it. Our second speaker graduated Bachelor of Science in Biology as magna cum laude in Mindanao State University and took her master's degree both in fisheries, major in aquaculture and management, major in business management at the University of the Philippines, Visayas. She took her doctorate degree in biology and aquaculture at Hokkaido University, Hakodate, Japan. She started her career in the field of science in 1977 and worked as Scientist 1 from 1999 to 2017, and presently she is the consultant on crustaceans of Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center. She also published about 40 scientific papers in national and international journals. Moreover, she also published manuals on hatchery, nursery operations of teenage shrimps and fortinid crabs, and on soft shell crab farming. To present mangrove crab culture, let us give the floor to Dr. Fe Dolores Parado Estep.
Good morning to everyone. So, I am tasked to present the technology and the culture of mangrove crab, and this will focus on the grow out of mangrove crabs. I'd like to start on a note that the mangrove crab culture in ponds is a technology that has not been developed from scratch by CIFDEC because decades ago, crablets that are sourced from the wild have been stocked in ponds and grown there to marketable size. These are then disposed in the market, but the thin or lean crabs are further fattened in ponds before they are disposed. Because of the high demand for mangrove crab, there is a very fast decline in the supply of wild stocks. That is why now we have a new technology where the baby crabs, actually they are called zoya, they are stocked in tanks, and that is already the hatchery phase, and grown to what we call the crab instar or crab juvenile size. Another technology is a nursery technology where these crab instars are grown further in hapa nets or net cages that are installed in the ponds until they reach the desirable size, the juvenile crabs. That's when they are grown in the pods for the grow out phase. By the way, the preferred species for culture is the king crab or the Scylla serrata. And there are three other species, the Tranquibarica or the purple mangrove crab, the Scylla olivacea, or the red crab, sometimes we call it the native crab species, and the Scylla parmamosane. This fourth species is not so common in our area here. Also, it is the one which is being cultured in Thailand and Vietnam. So Sila serrata can be distinguished by the polygonal markings on the legs and even in the abdomen of mature females, and the high frontal spines, and the two spines which are found in this segment. It is better shown here. So there are two spines. So now going to the crab growout in ponds and pens. So mangrove crabs can be grown in brackishwater ponds, in mangrove ponds, in pens, in coastal tidal flats, and in inland tidal mud flats. However, since it is very difficult to manage the mangrove area for 4 to 5 months culture, we recommend the culture or grow out in brackishwater ponds. I'd also like to show to you that these are net fences, which I will be mentioning in my next slides. So mangrove crabs are grown from crablets to market size in ponds alone or in combination with others. But this starts off with a pond preparation. So these are the steps in pond preparation, which I will not anymore elaborate since this has been discussed by the previous speaker. And after that, installation of net fences around the pond and the water management part. So for the monoculture or the culture system where only mangrove crabs are in the ponds, you should use about 1,000 pieces per hectare or even lower. So if you go to the polyculture type where they are cultured with other fish species, still you use this same stocking density. While for the milkfish, you can use stocking density of 1,500 to 3,000 pieces per hectare. You may wonder why they are using the same stocking density. It's because the two species are not competing for space or habitat. The crab uses the bottom portion of the pond, while the milkfish uses the water column. So the usual industry practice is a polyculture. So crablets are stocked at 500 to 1,000 per hectares, while milkfish fingerlings are at 1,500 to 3,000 per hectares. And these are grown for 4 to 5 months. And you usually get a survival rate of about 50% for the mangrove crabs and 80% for the milkfish. Now, other industry players also add shrimps because they demand also high price. However, we do not recommend such practice because both crabs and shrimps are crustaceans and therefore they share the same disease and increases the possibility of disease occurrence. For example, if the shrimps are infected with the white spot syndrome virus or WSSV, this will also infect the crabs. For feeds and feeding, we have natural food organisms in the ponds that the milkfish can feed on, and trash fish or low-value fish or brown mussel meat. I will show you in the next slide the other feeds that I used. The food ration or the amount of food given to the crabs are adjusted monthly or every 15 days. So these are the natural food in the ponds. So we have the lab for the milkfish. Mysids and copepods can also be eaten by the crabs when they are still young. And then we have the filamentous algae for the milkfish. Now, these ones are for feeding the crabs. We have low-value fish and small bivalves. I don't know if you are familiar with the agihis. So this is very popular, especially in Rojas. And you can also feed with boiled corn or the snails. That's why if you want to get rid of the snails in the ponds, in your milkfish ponds, you can always place some mangrove crabs. So this will feed on the snails. So this slide shows the percent of body weight used for feeding the crabs. So for example, if your crabs are still small and are less than 20 grams, then you feed 10% of its body weight. And as the crab grows, the percent body weight used for the amount of feeds will decrease and decrease until only 3% of the body weight, total body weight, will be fed to the crabs. Now, they should be daily monitoring of water quality parameters, the crab condition, the water depth, and there should be water replenishment every spring tide. That is if you don't have pumps. But if you have pumps, then you can easily just change your water anytime you want. So in water exchange, usually the pond growers just change 30% or up to 50% of the rearing water. But this one, as shown in this slide, has been shared to us by a very successful crab pond grower from Luzon. So what he does is first to input about 10% of the volume in the morning and then drain out 8% of the total volume in the evening. And in the second day, add 20% and again drain 16%, so on. Until in the fifth day, 50% of the water is added in the morning and 40% is drained out in the evening. So if you are going to add up the difference between the volume added and the volume drained, you would still get a total of 30%. And the same grower also shares that if the water is clear, the phytoplankton density is very low. If the pond is very big, which is usually the case in Luzon, then they just have the bangka and go around the pond. This is to agitate the. For monitoring feed consumption, you could use the feeding tray shown here. So you could place some amount, just a small amount of feeds, and place that in the pond. And after 32 minutes to 1 hour, then you can again lift up this feeding tray. And if there are still mangrove crabs which are alive in the pond, then they would tend to be attracted to the food, and you can use this to monitor the crab condition. So this is another kind of lift net. So this is called the bintol, which you could use also for monitoring. So these are used for sampling, and gill nets usually, which are used for shrimp sampling, should not be used as this could damage the appendages or the limbs of the crabs. Now, sampling of the stocks start at the first 30 days, the 30th day, and every 15 days thereafter. So in the slide, this shows a measurement of the carapace. This is the carapace of the crabs, and also weighing. The water should also be monitored regularly. So these are the optimum water and soil conditions for the culture of crabs and fish, but this can also be used as the optimal conditions for other species. So the temperature should not be very low, not lower than 26, and should not be very high. So you may wonder that we have used 80 centimeters to 100 centimeter water depth. This is in response to the climate change, which would result in very high temperatures. And salinity should be at 16 to 30 ppt. Now, when the crablets are, or when the crabs are still young, then they usually prefer the lower salinities. So, dissolved oxygen should not be less than 5 ppm. And we have here the pH and other parameters. So I have some up here, the important features of the crab ponds. So the water depth should not be less than 80 centimeters. And net fence should be built around the pond. Optimal parameters should be maintained. And the soil of the pond should be clay or clayey loam. So sandy soil is not good for crab culture. Now, also, in stocking, you could keep in mind the price at harvest. So usually, the highest price would be during the holidays in December, January, up to the Chinese New Year. So you compute back 4 to 5 months before that, and you do the stocking there. We have also observed that stocking at a density of higher than 3,000 per hectare will just result in low survival. And as I've already mentioned, Sila serrata or the king crab is a preferred species for growout culture since this does not result in the damage of the pond dikes. The other two species common in the Philippines, the Truncibarica and the Olivaceae, usually damage the dikes. And recording of daily activities should be important so that if traceability will be required for your stocks, then you have this record. Crabs do not molt at the same time and they do not grow at the same pace. So that's why there are some crabs which reach marketable size ahead of others. So you can do selective harvesting. You can do it by the lift net method or by the bintol, where you place some food as bait and then wait for the crabs to stay and be attracted to the bait, or by the current method, since the crab go against the current. So you can just scoop out at your gate where the inflow of water is, and then just scoop out the big crabs. And after 120 or 150 days of culture, then you can do the total harvesting. So you first gather the crabs using the lift net or current method and totally drain the pond. Then you hand pick the stocks that are left in the ponds. So the harvested crabs should be kept in shady, cool, and moist place. Now, I included the site selection because, well, it should be accessible to transport with available electric power in case you have pumps, and should be accessible to communications. This last one is the one which I would like to emphasize, good security. It is very easy to harvest the crabs because you just, somebody else, not the owner of the pond, can place bintols or lift nets there, and you can already catch the crabs. So there must be good security in your ponds. And then we have the packing and transport. If you want to transport them by air, then you should have these styrofoam boxes with the plastic bottoms lined with cheesecloth and then arranged this way. Lean crabs can be sold at a much lower price than the fat crabs, but these are always present during the harvest of the ponds. So instead of disposing them immediately, the pond growers can fatten them to command a higher price. So this setup is what is used. So these are bamboo compartments, or you can use the plastic containers for crab fattening, and then you wait for them to be fattened for about 15 to 30 days. Then you can dispose of them at a much higher price than the lean crabs. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers, DOST 6, especially Ms. Novelyn Ann Factuar and Mr. Julius Rumar Gabiota for allowing us to present these technologies.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Estefa. Our next speaker started his career in StepDeck from 1986, and presently he is the information specialist under the training section, training and information division of StepDeck AQD in Tibawan, Iloilo. He graduated Bachelor of Science in Fisheries, major in inland fisheries at the University of the Philippines, and took his master's degree in fisheries, major in aquaculture at Iloilo State College of Fisheries, Marotac, Nuevo Iloilo. His publications include LHRHA and Mosaic in Roots, spawning of Asian catfish, Clarias macrocephalus, at different times during an annual reproductive cycle. To present reviving the native catfish, let's call on Mr. Rosenio Remblora Pabellor.
Thank you, Mr. Gabiota, for the kind introduction. One of the critical challenges we are facing today, apart from how to control this COVID-19 pandemic, is how to increase catfish production. But the most pressing issue which needs immediate action is conservation and management of our native catfish. So the title of my presentation is Reviving the Native Catfish Clarias macrocephalus Industry. The primary aim of this presentation is to discuss the current status of our native catfish and to reawaken all the sectors, the government agencies, research institutions, SUCs, and the private sectors to work together for the conservation and management, breeding, and culture of this species. Because of limited time allotted for this presentation, I will focus my presentation on the following topics. Here is the outline of my presentation. I will be discussing the status of the catfish industry, highlights of SeaFDEC AQD studies, and conservation and management strategies. Here is the 2018 freshwater fish species production. Topping the list is milkfish with 57%, followed by tilapia 40%, carp 2%, and our catfish 1%. Here are the top catfish producing regions in 2018. The top 7 catfish producing regions are Central Luzon, Davao Region, Western Visayas, Soc-Sargen, Calabarzon, ARMM, and Cagayan Valley. These are all productions from African catfish. Here are the 3 commonly cultured Clarias species. The most popularly cultured is the aggressive and invasive African catfish, Clarias garipinus, which was introduced to the Philippines from Taiwan in 1985. Clarias batrachus from Thailand in 1972, and our very own Clarias macrocephalus. All the clariid species can be identified by the shape of the occipital process. The shape of the occipital process in African catfish is M-shaped, pointed in Clarias batrachus, and rounded in our native catfish. According to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN, based on the 2013 study by Vithayanon and Allen, our native catfish is a near-threatened species, or the number of mature population all over Southeast Asia, not only in the Philippines, is decreasing because of loss of a suitable habitat. But what is alarming is our native catfish has low genetic diversity, based on the study of Tan et al. 2016, which was published in the Journal of Threatened Taxa. Low genetic diversity means higher vulnerability to environmental pressures and may eventually face an extinction if subjected to changing environmental variables. At present, I think our native catfish population is either endangered or critically endangered. And this calls for immediate proper conservation and management effort. Despite extensive sampling activities throughout the Philippines by Tan et al., presently our native catfish can only be found in two areas in Cagayan, Camalanyugan and Bugay, and one down in Bunawan, Agusan del Sur. Back in the early 70s, our native catfish used to be abundant in many inland water bodies throughout the Philippines. Laguna Lake, Taal Lake, Nauan Lake, Lake Lanao, to name a few. Juliano et al. 1989 reported that with the introduction of the Thai catfish in Luzon in 1972, to augment the inadequate supply of our native catfish fry, over time, the Thai catfish have ecologically displaced the natural populations of our native catfish, and that their population started to decline. With the introduction of the aggressive and invasive African catfish in 1985, the conversion of rice fields to subdivisions and use of pesticides, the population of our native catfish further declined. In response to the declining natural population of our native catfish and inadequate seed supply, CIFDEC AQD from 1988 to early 2001, with funding from the Fisheries Sector Program of the Department of Agriculture, Bureau of Agricultural Research, conducted research studies and verification trials on breeding, nutrition, fish health, and culture. 21 research studies were conducted and published in scientific journals. 10 proceedings books were produced, 2 extension manuals, the breeding and seed production, and the grow-out culture of the native catfish, and 1 flyer. And the conduct of the training course on freshwater aquaculture starting 1995 to disseminate the aquaculture technologies developed not only for our native catfish but also for other freshwater species like tilapia, bighead carp, and freshwater prawn. Here are some of the highlights of those studies. Our native catfish, just like other catfishes, can be induced to spawn in captivity using natural and synthetic hormones. The optimum dose of hormone and the latency period have been established. Our native catfish has fast growth rate, reaching an average body weight of 108 grams in 4 months, fed with formulated diet containing about 32% crude protein. And another, it can be stocked at high densities, can be polycultured with tilapia at a ratio of 40:30 per cubic meter using bioflak technology. Our native catfish is resistant to diseases. The two most common diseases affecting African catfish are the crackhead disease or broken skull disease. This is one of the most common and deadliest diseases in fish farming. It could be called an HIV to catfish if it is discovered at a later stage, and treatments might be less effective. What are the possible causes of this disease? Number one, it may be genetic or hereditary, inbreeding. Number two, lack of certain nutrients or inability of catfish to make use of these nutrients in the feed. It has been documented that vitamin C in catfish feed plays an important role in enhancing the ability of catfish body system to absorb vital micronutrients that support bone health and formation, that guard against crackhead. Enrichment of vitamin C in formulated diets at a ratio of 500 milligrams ascorbic acid per kilogram feed given during the nursery culture up to the entire grow-out culture period prevented the occurrence of this disease. What are the visual manifestations of disease? During the early stage, red band on the mid-dorsal area of the skull of the African catfish. And at a later stage, fissure develops on the mid-dorsal area of the skull, distended abdomen due to septicemia and hemorrhage, and exophthalmos or pop eye. This disease can be treated if detected at an early stage. As soon as these symptoms are observed during sampling, feeding should be substantially reduced and pond water should be replaced. Generally, the fish recovers after a few weeks, after which feeding can be increased little by little. Another disease is the epizootic ulcerative syndrome, or the red spot disease, and there's no effective treatment for this. Lesions can range from small pinpoint red spots, localized swelling, scale loss, skin erosion, reddened areas of the skin under the scales, and ulcerations. Infection in fish occurs when motile spores of the fungi Aphanomyces invadans in the water or other carriers vectors are attracted to the skin of the fish. Again, our native catfish is resistant to this disease, EUS. Since the populations of our native catfish are endangered because of low genetic diversity, conservation and management strategies should be done. The first strategy is in situ and involves habitat rehabilitation, establishment of protected areas, and addition of habitats. In in situ conservation measures are done to preserve genetic diversity. And by increasing local awareness through education of the locals in the vicinity can relieve the pressures being exerted by human impact. Another conservation and management strategy is ex situ or off-site, such as translocations, captive breeding, and reintroductions. These strategies are done to increase genetic diversity, unlike for in situ is to preserve genetic diversity. Ex situ is to increase genetic diversity. Captive breeding should be done as a last resort for endangered species in the management of fish stock. In summary, CIFDEC AQD conducted research and verification studies on the breeding and seed production of our native catfish from 1988 to early 2001, and has been disseminating the technology for seed production through the conduct of the freshwater aquaculture training course since 1995. The native catfish industry is dead. Most of our farmers are growing African catfish. Since the population of our native catfish from the wild has low genetic diversity, management and conservation efforts through in situ and ex situ strategies should be mobilized as soon as possible in order to ensure the recovery of the remaining native catfish populations in the wild. CIFDEC AQD has been advocating sustainable development of aquaculture to ensure that the present natural resources will still be available for future generations. Sustainable development of aquaculture is attainable only if we invest in science and through coordinated action by all sectors of the society. The government sector, particularly BIFAR, in collaborating with LGUs, especially in Cagayan and Agusan del Sur, to inform the communities about the current status of our native catfish, and for LGUs to lobby to politicians, policymakers to issue law enforcing the protection of the same. For research institutions like CIFDEC, DOST, and SUCs to plan and conduct controlled breeding programs, and finally for the private sectors to propagate our native catfish. Our native catfish population is endangered. Proper management and conservation efforts should be done immediately. Let us save our native catfish by conservation, management, breeding, and culture before it is too late. We must act immediately, and the future is now. On behalf of our CIFDEC AQD Chief, Mr. Dandy Balyao, I would like to thank DOST Region 6 for initiating this well-timed project amidst COVID-19 pandemic to revive and boost the native catfish industry, and also for the opportunity to showcase CIFDEC AQD's extensive work on this species. Again, good morning to everyone. Thank you for listening.
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pagador. We are down to our last speaker. Our last speaker graduated Bachelor of Science in Aquaculture and Master of Science in Fisheries, major in Aquaculture at the University of the Philippines, Visayas. She is one of the authors of Hatchery Production of Snub-Nosed Pompano. She started her career in CIFDEC in 2005, and at present, she is an associate researcher at the Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center Aquaculture Department, Breeding and Seed Production Section. To present Pompano Nursery and Growout Culture, let us welcome Ms. Maria Irene Legaspi.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the DOST Region 6 for giving us the opportunity to share the technologies that have been developed in SIFDEC AQD, the Pompano Nursery and Growout Cage Culture. The growing of pompano in cages is becoming popular because the fish readily adapts to the culture environment and fish grows at a uniform rate. The mass production of pompano by cage farming was found to be effective. Nursery culture is simply the culture of the fry, which is a product from the hatchery to fingerling size, while grow-out culture is the culture of fingerlings to juveniles or the marketable size. This is a growing industry worldwide. This is an alternative livelihood for more than 1.5 million marginalized fisher folks and to provide fishermen the opportunity to start a livelihood in aquaculture, and is meant to teach local residents on more profitable use of high-valued species by selling them live. Before starting the nursery and grow-out culture in the net cages in marine waters, there are some important considerations. The site must be located in safe areas with sufficient movement of water, preferably in a cove where the fish can be protected from adverse weather conditions and from strong wave actions. The site must be accessible to sources of inputs and with a water depth of at least 10 meters and should be free from pollution coming from industrial, agricultural, and domestic waste. Next is the seed supply or the pompano fry, popularly known as similia. Pompano fry is available year-round and can be sourced only from the hatchery. And feeds. A consistent supply and quality of feeds is very important. Feeding was made easy because you just have to broadcast the feeds to the fish. No preparation needed. Risk of disease is eliminated. Easy to store and formulation is tailored to the nutritional requirements of the species. This is proven through a consistent high growth rate of the fish. Why culture pompano? So this species of pompano, the Trachinotus blochi, also known as knobnose pompano, Asian pompano, silver pompano, or oyster cracker or dart in some other countries, has silvery, firm, white, and tasty meat, making it popular in restaurants. This has less intramuscular bones compared with our famous fish, bangus. This fish is a potential candidate for aquaculture because it can readily adapt to the culture environment and can easily be weaned to formulated diet, and has high value in domestic and international market. Commercial production of this species of pompano only began in 1990s in Asia. In later part of the year 2000, production has expanded in China. In the recent years, production outside China was reported in other Asian countries such as Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, India, and the Philippines, with significant volumes from Indonesia. And basically, pompano industry in the Philippines is still growing and is still not included in the major species produced in aquaculture as recorded in the fisheries profile in 2018. However, there is high potential for this species for mass production. I believe pompano can have its own share of this pie in the near future. So this is to show you the comparison of different marine fish species during the nursery period. Pompano, like other marine fish, can be cultured in brackish water and seawater environment. In the natural environment, they feed on hard-shelled invertebrates, especially the mollusks such as oysters. That is why they are so called oyster cracker in other countries. However, these fish can be easily weaned or trained to feed on formulated diets, so it is easy to feed them. They have faster growth rate compared to other high-valued species because they are not cannibalistic like groupers, snapper, and sea bass. They have better survival. Nursery is simply the growing of the fry of about 1 inch long or 0.5 grams to fingerling size of at least 40 grams for grow-out culture. In this case, growing will be in the floating net. Net cages for nursery culture must have a mesh size of at least 0.5 cm, not less or smaller than the size of the cultured fish. This B-net, as shown in the picture, is best for nursery culture. The size of the cage can be a 2 by 2 by 1.5 meter or a 5 by 5 by 3 meters can be used for the nursery. Then, if the nets are installed, pompano can be transported, acclimated for a few minutes, and stuck to the nursery cage setup. For the cage maintenance during the nursery culture, change nets should be done every week or depending on season. every week during summer because of faster growth of filamentous algae, and every 2 weeks during rainy season. Feeding must be done 4 times a day following this guide for feeding. For average body weight or ABW of 0.5 to 5 grams, 12% feeding rate must be followed. Using mash form of formulated diet and gradually decreasing to 5% depending on ABW. Fish is fed 4 times a day to make the feeds available always to the fish, preventing aggressive behavior during the nursery stage. This formulated feed contains 45 to 47% crude protein and 8 to 12% crude fat. For the most recent conduct of Pompano Nursery in the floating cages in SIFDEC AQD's Igang Marine Station, fish were stocked in a 2x2 by 1.5 meter cage with 200 per cubic meter stocking density, with an initial size of 2.5 cm cultured for 105 days. A 72 to 85% survival rates of at least 40 grams fish was obtained with a 2.2 to 2.4 feed conversion ratio. Then the harvested fish of at least 40 gram size in the nursery were transferred to the bigger cage for grow-out culture to juvenile or marketable size of at least 300 to 400 grams for 5 to 6 months. Since nursery culture was carried out in the floating net cage in the sea, there's no more problem on transport of this size of the fish. As you all know, transport of this size is difficult and costly. For the net cages for grow-out culture, a different netting materials are selected, which is according to the size of the fish to be cultured. For this, PE net number 14 is used with a mesh size of 1.2 cm, and now it's the knotted type. Cage dimension can be 5 by 5 by 3 meters or a 10 by 10 by 4 meters. Growing of pompano in floating cages of 10 by 10 by 4 meters stocked with 20 to 40 fish per cubic meter with an initial size of at least 40 grams were cultured for 180 days. And 95 to 98% survival rate of at least 300 to 400 grammers fish was obtained with 2.5 FCR. Cage maintenance during grow-out period is almost the same with that during the nursery culture. Change nets every week or 2 weeks or depending on the volume of filamentous algae attached on the net cages. Water quality levels optimum for marine fish culture in cages includes a temperature that range from 27 to 31 degrees Celsius, salinity of 15 to 34 ppt, dissolved oxygen of more than 4 ppm, a pH of 6.5 to 8.5, nitrite of less than 4 ppm, nitrates of less than 0.5 ppm, and a transparency of more than 30 centimeters must be maintained for optimum growth and health. This is to show you the characteristics of marine fish species in the grow-out cage culture. Comparing pompano with other marine fish, it can be stocked in high density of 20 to 40 fish per cubic meter, higher compared with other aggressive and cannibalistic fish, can be purely fed formulated diet, and can be cultured in shorter duration of 5 to 6 months. There are some few factors to consider for the cage design. First is it must be site-specific. The design of the cage must be appropriate and must be based on the conditions prevailing in the selected site. So the knowledge on the topography, wind force, wind direction, prevalence of storms, monsoons, wave height, current velocity, and water is important. The rate of biofouling in the species composition of the marine fauna in and around the site should be known also, as well as the ecological requirements and behavior of the species, and the cage must withstand the forces of the current, waves, and wind. By the way, there are 2 types of cages. First is the floating cages, composed of floating units made of either wooden slabs, bamboo spars, HDPE, or the high-density polyethylene, and a flexible net cage composed of nets made of nylon with double netting, inner nets for keeping the fish stocks, and outer nets for the predators. Another type of cage is the submersible ones. This picture was taken from the project of Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA, on the rehabilitation and recovery from the Typhoon Yolanda in the eastern Visayas, particularly in summer and late. This is a submersible fish cage made of high-density polyethylene. This is highly waterproof and resistant to waves and known to be typhoon resilient. This is appropriate for areas frequently affected by the typhoon because it can withstand strong winds and waves. This type of cage can be lowered or raised in water. The picture shown below was the moment the fish cage was to be submerged to be safe when typhoon is coming. This type of cage is quite costly but has high assurance for durability and long-term use. Next, I would like to share with you a video of one of our colleagues who is having his internship in Greece on the harvest of fish in one of the HDPE cages. Harvest was made easy because of some more advanced and faster way of taking out fish from the cage to the chilling containers. I hope we can also have this fast, helpful, and high-tech ways to harvest fish in the near future. Advantages of growing out fish in sea cages. It is economical and easy to construct. This is for cages made of bamboo and wooden frames. Fish can be stocked at much higher densities compared to growing in fish ponds. Next is it is easy to harvest. For 5 by 5 by 3 meters or 10 by 10 by 4 meters cage, harvesting is just done by lifting up the cage to concentrate the fish and scoop them out. Easy to control predation. Enclosed fishes are protected from predators. Good water exchange because water is flowing through the cage. It may bring food through the cage and it can carry away water inside. And because of that, there is effective use of existing water bodies. Design of the cage is technically simple. So with this, stock management and monitoring was made easy. And of course, fish grown from the open sea has distinctive character in terms of taste. So this is to show you the financial analysis of growing pompano in net cages. In a 10 by 10 by 4 meters floating net cage stocked with 8,000 pompano fingerlings per cage, or following the stocking density of 20 fish per cubic meter, having an average body weight of 40 grams. The fingerlings are grown for 180 days or 6 months until the average harvestable size of 300 grams was attained. 2 croppings annually is possible because it would take 6 months per crop. So with the 90% survival rate, 7,200 pieces of pompano are harvested, weighing a total of 2,160 kilograms per crop. On the other hand, in the 4-cage operation, it is expected to harvest 8,640 kilograms per crop, or 17,280 kilograms annually. The cost and return analysis shows that with estimated production output and selling price of 300 pesos per kilogram, 1-cage operation's annual gross value is at 1.2 million, while the 4-cage operation can expect gross value amounting to 5 million. The undiscounted economic indicators support better profitability of a 4-cage operation. Return on investment is 170% and the payback period of 0.5 years or half a year. While in 1-cage operation, ROI is at 124% and a payback period of 0.6 years. Both operations will take less than a year to recover the initial costs incurred for the investment items, but the 4-cage operation presents more favorable results. For market potential and prospects, pompano, like other high-valued species, has high market demand in the domestic and international market. This is shown by a high level of market acceptance in the US and Europe during the acceptance trials conducted and reported by BFAR. Here are some recommendations and some studies conducted, and some are still ongoing at SIFDEC AQD. First is to ensure the availability of seed supply. Sustainable supply of good quality seed stock is the key to successful aquaculture enterprise. To ensure availability of seed supply, there is a need to expand the seed production facilities. Good thing that SIFDEC AQD, in collaboration with BFAR, has initiated in looking for a suitable site and building legislated hatcheries for multi-species such as milkfish, pompano, and other high-valued species. I hope this could address the problem on seed supply. So since broodstock operation is expensive and need high maintenance, broodstock can be maintained by few central hatcheries, and eggs or larvae will be provided to several satellite hatcheries for larval rearing. In the Philippines, there is very few broodstock hatcheries for pompano. I think one in Luzon, SIFDEC in the Visayas, and that big aquaculture company in Mindanao has stopped breeding pompano. I am actually convincing our consistent client in General Santos to develop their pompano in the Growout so that they would not need to buy pompano here anymore, as transport takes a lot of cost, Aside from that, they could also supply other hatcheries in the nearby provinces. To lower feed costs, the use of alternative and cost-effective rearing techniques were studied. In the nursery stage, because Pompano still prefers live food, artificial illumination were set up during the night to attract zooplankton that can help satisfy the nutritional requirements of the fry. In that way, consumption of artificial diet is lessened and subsequently lowering feed costs that take up much of the production cost. Next is the essential amino acids such as taurine, histidine, leucine, and isoleucine had been determined to develop a cost-effective feed. Another is the use of alternative and low-cost feed ingredient to replace fish meal-based diet. One example here is the spray-dried hemoglobin powder meal or blood meal, which could be a good source of protein for growth of marine fishes. And the use of agricultural waste and byproduct can also help lower feed costs. Plant-based protein alternative for fish meal were tested in other aquaculture species and must still to be introduced to Pompano diet and tested to this species of Pompano. For fish health, use of herbal treatments such as garlic extracts and chemotherapeutants such as emamectin benzoate were tested against sea lice or the parasitic organisms that were usually affecting Pompano stocks in the grow-out stage. Skin erosion can be seen in this Pompano caused by caligid infestation. The studies on the use of herbal extracts and chemotherapeutants are still ongoing. And the use of vaccines. Vaccination was first studied in the sea bass breeders and was proven to be effective in controlling vertical transmission of the virus. It was illustrated in this study that annual immunization regimen with the virus vaccine. It was illustrated in this study that annual immunization regimen with inactivated nervous necrosis virus vaccine is an efficient method for sustaining a virus-free breeders reared in land-based tanks, circumventing the risk of vertical transmission of the virus from asymptomatic breeders to their offspring. The potential application of immunization regimen established in sea bass were being adapted to other marine fish species such as Pompano, and still being studied. And the post-harvest facilities. This is to keep fish fresh and increase shelf life of the fresh fish, including freezing, chilling, and the use of ultra-high pressure must be available so fish culturists must not have problem in disposal of fish. So since Pompano is still a grooming industry, marketing and promotion is needed for this fish as this is still not popular in other regions. This fish is usually found only in supermarkets and restaurants. So with that, I would like to end my presentation by wishing you all to keep safe, especially at this time of pandemic. Be healthy and therefore eat healthy fish like this Pompano. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Legaspi. And now we will use the remaining time for the open forum session. We would like to request the participants to briefly introduce themselves, their office or firm, then state their question and to whom you address the question. So, who would like to go first? So we have question from one expert chat from Bebot Lopez. He is a fish pond operator in Rojas City, Capiz. His question is how to get rid of kusay, aquatic plant in the fish pond. Though it helps to have a good dissolved oxygen, but it occupies a lot of space until it covers the whole pond. So anyone from SEFDEC may answer the question from Mr. Bebot Lopez.
Okay. Yes, hello. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Kusay thrives, in abundance when you have lower salinities. There is an advantage to this many years ago when we started growing monodon, because the associated fauna that exists together with the kusay-kusay is beneficial to the sugpo. The way that we can eradicate kusay-kusay is if we can manage to increase the salinity, then your kusay-kusay will just die off. Or if not, then we need to introduce mechanical means. And what we did with this problem before is through the use of a mechanical rotavator, the kuliglig, you know. So you will bring that inside the pond. You have a freshwater environment anyway. So and then you start filling the bottom. This will help eradicate the kusay-kusay by physically chopping these epiphytes into fine particles. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We have another question from One Expert Chat from Myril Calindro. She's from Iloilo and a client of the OST6. She's asking how to ensure the high survival rate of catfish. Do you also offer trading in hito farming?
Hello. Maraming salamat sa tanong mo. Ulitin ko lang ang tanong mo kung nakuha ko. How to ensure higher survival ng catfish sa fish pond?
Yes, sir.
Hatchery ba to or grow out? Kasi katulad ng sinabi ko during my presentation, lahat ng mga catfish growers dito sa Iloilo are using African catfish. Ang tanong mo ba, higher survival rate sa hatchery or sa grow out?
Maybe, sir, she was referring to the hatchery and grow out.
Okay, I'll start with the hatchery. Nagkaroon kami kasi ng seminar sa Saraga a few weeks ago. Ang mga participants ay African catfish hatchery and grow out operators. Sa hatchery, no, how to increase survival. Sinabi ko doon na since ang African catfish ay very cannibalistic during the hatchery phase, especially from day 7, medyo aggressive na yan. So kailangan, ang behavior kasi ng catfish, they are feeding sa bottom. Mas aggressive ang catfish kung masyadong mataas ang light intensity. So ang suggestion ko is to cover sa hatchery, no, cover at least 80% to minimize aggressiveness and also ma-minimize din ang cannibalism. Ang isa pang practice na ginagawa nila doon is they start feeding day 3 or 4 with artificial feed kagad. Ang suggestion ko is to use natural food like newly hatched Artemia nuclei. Kasi during the early stage, hindi pa develop ang stomach ng catfish larvae. So kailangan mo muna natural food like Artemia nuclei. Then eventually, iwin mo siya sa artificial food. And to also have a higher survival, since aggressive nga ang catfish, start sa day 7, dapat mag-sort ka. I suggest every 5 days sorting kung po pwede. para mas mataas pa ang survival. At ang isa pa is sabi ko kailangan ang light intensity, dapat at least dark. I recommend using yellow light. Based sa mga studies na nabasa ko, mas maganda ang survival ng fly kung ang light intensity ay mababa. Sa growout naman, siyempre importante, pond preparation, proper pond preparation. Ang pinaka, kumbaga sa ano, kahit na anong farming, good pond preparation to eliminate predators. Ang stocking density na ginagamit namin, ito for native catfish, Clarias macrocephalus, isang study ni Mr. Conisa, sa growout culture, ang stocking density na ginagamit is 10 per square meter. Kasi, alam niyo naman, sabi ko nga, parati ko ina-emphasize na cannibalistic. So, kung mas mataas ang stocking density, mataas din ang... So, another way para makontrol mo, aside from controlling the stocking density, is to put substrate sa bottom. At I recommend using formulated feeds with high crude protein content, like say 40% crude protein content. Kasi ang isa pa, kapag if you use yung mga chicken entrails, I think it is one of the causes nitong crackhead disease. Ito pinaka number 1 na disease na na-encounter sa catfish farming. So I recommend, instead of using itong mga chicken entrails and natural, which also contribute sa pag-pollute ng tubig, I recommend using formulated diets kasi complete na siya. At ma-shorten yung culture period. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Sir, she is also asking if you also offer training in hito farming.
Yes. As I've said earlier, since 1995, we have been offering the freshwater training course. Tabi ng ng freshwater station to sa Manila. Pero right now, we are constructing freshwater hatchery here in Tigbawan, Iloilo to cater sa mga kliyente na from the Visayas and Mindanao. So, hopefully, matatapos tong catfish hatchery namin dito sa Iloilo in the near future para ma-accommodate yung request for training. Pero pwede naman kami mag-conduct ng training. Kaya lang dahil nga sa sitwasyon natin, itong COVID-19, kung po pwede, mag-antay lang muna siya. Anyway, may website kami. Please visit our website at www.sifdec.org.ph. Nakalagay doon ang mga schedule and training courses na kinakonduct namin. Pero unfortunately, because of this COVID-19 pandemic, concentrate kami sa online training course. Probably we can also develop an online training course on catfish in the near future. Thank you very much.
Sir, I'd like to ask another question as regards to what you mentioned earlier about the use of intestines for feeding the catfish, because there are operators in Nueva Ecija and Bulacan that uses the intestines of pig or other animals, sir, because naniniwala daw sila na mas nagpapataba ito ng catfish, and that pag mas mataba daw yung skin ng catfish, nalilesen yung lacerations because these are the problems of the harvesters and operators, the laceration. So how true is this po?
Ang unang concern ko, kapag nag-use ka naman ganyang, kailangan siguro i-cook mo muna properly. Kasi ang number one problema dyan is pollution, water pollution. Di ba? Tapos, na-contaminate mo yung tubig. If you use yung mga ganyan, pig entrails, okay lang siguro kung lutuin niya. Lutuin before feeding. Hindi yung basta lang na, kasi ang Central Luzon, di ba, ang number one na catfish, African catfish produced region sa buong Pilipinas. Specifically, ang Bulacan, ang may maraming mga hatcheries sa Growout operators eh. Yun ang feedback sa akin, na gumagamit sila. Umisa pa nga, live na, patay na manok. Direct lang hinahaboy lang dito sa pond. I hope okay lang yung sagot ko.
Sige po, salamat po, sir.
Okay.
Next question we have from Apple Gray Diallo from Iloilo. The question is for Sir Pagador. For the artificial reproduction by induced spawning of native catfish, what type of hormone can you recommend for use?
Okay, thank you for your question. Artificial induction of spawning. May natural hormones na ginagamit. You can use either pituitary gland. Meron kaming manual na pinakita ko kanina. Pwede siya makabili ng manual na yun. And we also have a flyer available sa website. Pwede niya ma-check yan. So www.cfdet.org.ph. May flyer kami na pwede niya download for free. Pero anyway, sabihin ko na rin, sa natural hormone, can use pituitary gland. One homogenized pituitary gland per 100 gram body weight. I'm referring to native catfish because ito yung may brochure kami. And for the other natural hormone, yung human chorionic gonadotropy or HCG, ang dosage is 400 IU per 100 gram body weight. Artificial hormone man, pwedeng gumamit ng LHRH analog, may kasamang pimoside kasi yun ang dopamine antagonist, pimoside. Pwedeng gumamit siya ng Ovaprim at a dose of 0.02 ml Ovaprim per 100 gram body weight, or Ovatide at a dose of 0.02 to 0.05 ml Ovatide per 100 gram body weight. Yes. So, I suggest na pwede niyang i-check ang website namin, www.cfdet.org.ph. May free flyer on catfish na pwede niyang ma-download. Thank you.
Thank you po. Next question from David Marioni. He is from NCR. Yung question niya po, is Philippines interested to adopt techniques to produce insect meal from various agricultural wastes, which can then be used to replace fish meal and soybean meal in feed production?
Insect meal to replace insect meal, replacement for insect meal as a replacement sa feed. Insect meal.
Yes.
Wala pa kaming, excuse me wala pa kaming studies dito sa CFDEC using insect meal as a replacement. Pero kita ko sa internet, ginagawa na yan sa ibang mga countries.
Okay po, thank you, sir. Let's go on sa Google Meet natin. From Ms. Jean Rose Makirang from Aklan State University, is algal paste used in commercial milkfish and cigarette nursery culture?
Answer that question.
Okay. Um, at
Yes, sir.
Okay. Um, we have not tried using algal paste in our nursery um, culture of milkfish or cygonids, but we are using algal paste in the hatchery. So to grow the larvae to fry stage, we are using algal paste here. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you po. Let's proceed to the question from Ernesto Del Rosario. He is from Mariano Marcos State University. How could we predict survival rate during sampling as part of our monitoring activity in ponds and cages for milkfish and other fin fishes?
Yeah, I have answered his question via online chat, and I relate to him that the best method that I have been using is to diligently, very strictly monitor mortalities immediately after stocking or 5 days thereafter. In so doing, you can get the number of surviving fish that you have in your pond or in your cage. And then you can use that number, barring any other mortalities or escapes, as your survival throughout the culture period. It's quite different for shrimps because for shrimps, we use a feeding tray to monitor the consumption. And based on the consumption, we can derive an estimate of the population. For milkfish, we use floating pellets or sinking pellets, and there is no way for us to determine consumption based on population, except visually monitoring the length of time that the floating pellets are being consumed. So it is best to pinpoint the observed number of mortalities right after stocking, because that is the only time that you get mortalities after transport and stocking, and for the next 5 days. We have to do it diligently because in the fish pond, if you don't go to the ponds very early in the morning and recover the mortalities, the birds will recover those mortalities ahead of you, or even the crabs. And if they take out the dead fish, then you lose count of your mortalities and will get you off the number of your surviving population. So be very strict about your mortalities during the first 5 days of culture, and use that number to subtract from the number. Well, you of course have to know the number of fish that you stock, so you can subtract your mortalities from that number, and eventually use that as the surviving figure for your feed computation and etc. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Ryan F. Fabay from Mindanao State University in Maguindanao. What physical appearance can we observe in mature male native catfish, since we try to match from African catfish?
Okay, nakuha ko ang tanong mo. Ang tanong mo ay how to distinguish a mature species of catfish ba? Male, female. Pinakita ko
Male,
sa earlier slide ko na ang different clarid species can be identified by the shape of the occipital process. Yung kaninang slide ko, pinakita ko, sa native catfish, ang shape, yung sa skull bala, isa head portion, rounded ang shape ng occipital process ng native catfish or Clarias macrocephalus. Ang African catfish ay, ang shape ng occipital process niya is M-shape. Ngayon, paano mo ma-distinguish? Another question is male from female. Tama ba? How to distinguish a male from a female catfish, right?
Sir, he was asking if what physical appearance can we observe in mature male native catfish po? Since they are trying to match it, I think, with African catfish.
Oh yes, I answered that a while ago. Yung shape ng occipital process, yung sa skull. And importante to distinguish if it's a native catfish or an African catfish. And isang physical, mas malaki ang African catfish compared. Pinakamaliit sa tatlong species, ang native catfish. Thank you.
Okay. He has a follow-up question, sir. What gears can we use to avoid stress from wild collection? Because in Liguasan Marsh is one of the major sources of native catfish in Mindanao also.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
What gears can we use to avoid stress from wild collection?
What gears to use to avoid stressing?
Stress from wild collection. Yes po.
Ang native catfish is very hardy, right? Because they have this accessory breathing organ. Nakakalakad nga yan sa lupa eh. So I think gill net can be used or pero na hindi lang bala hindi natin kasi baka masugat yung skin. O nga, Guasan Marsh sa North Cotabato.
Yes.
Oo. Yan pinaka ano yata, hindi pa yata yan natatapi. Ang kausap ko the other day sa BIPAR, kasi kumukuha ako ng data all over the Philippines kung anong mga species ang kinukulture nila. Kaya ako nalaman African catfish. All the regions in the Philippines are producing African catfish. Itong North Cotabato, gusto nilang revive itong native catfish natin. Kasi sabi niya, meron pang natitirang native catfish doon sa Liguasan Marsh. Yun nga, ang sabi ko nga, kailangan ASAP din na kailangan i-conserve and manage muna before tong captive breeding. Or at the same time, pwedeng in situ and ex situ conservation and management strategies at the same time. Thank you.
Okay, sir. We have another question. What specific diet from newly hatched eggs to fry until fingerlings, and what are the main problems you encountered in hatchery?
Is that for catfish also?
Yes, sir. He is referring to catfish.
Okay. Specific diets from eggs to fry. Tama ba?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
From to fry until fingerlings, sir.
Okay. starting sa native catfish, no? Starting day 4, ang sabi ko kanina, dapat natural food muna. I said newly hatched Artemia nuclei. Kasi mataas ang nutrition ng newly hatched Artemia nuclei. Then iwin mo, sige, after magpipid ka, no, starting day 4 sa native catfish ng enriched Artemia nuclei. Then by day 6 or day 7, pwede ka nang mag-introduce, bali iwiwin mo yung mash, iwiwin mo with the newly hatched Artemia nuclei. Then later, purely formulated feeds. Ang importante rito, na-mention ko nga, especially during the nursery phase, to control itong crackhead disease, ang feed kailangan gina-supplement o ini-enrich ng ascorbic acid. Ang concentration na sinabi ko kanina is 500 milligrams of ascorbic acid per kilogram ng formulated feed. Starting from the nursery hanggang sa grow-out culture period. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you very much, sir. We have question from Jeannie Mamhot. She is from La Union. Can I ask if there are dissemination services for pompano fry in Region 1?
Dissemination services.
I think this question is addressed to Ma'am Legaspi.
Hello. Hello, thank you
Yes,
for the question, Ms. Jeannie. So for your question regarding the services for pompano fry in Region 1, actually we are recommending to take or contact the hatchery nearest your place. So I think for Region 1, nearest place for pompano supply, pompano fry is from Daan, so from a famous feed company, Luzon. You can also, we also, for SIFDAC ACD, we can help facilitate transport of fry, but ano lang po, hanggang airport lang po kami. So you still have to pick it up from Manila airport, and then you have to transport papunta po sa inyong place sa Region 1. So since it takes longer time for transport, so it would still be better if doon na lang po kayo kukuha ng supply nearest po sa inyong region. Yan lang po. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question is from Hannah Camel Sagador from DOST Antique. For Dr. Fe Estepa, in the Sila Serrata hatchery, what antibiotics do you use, and what is the survival rate from Zoya to crab instar?
Can you repeat please the question?
In the Sila Serrata hatchery, what antibiotics do you use? And what is the survival rate from Zoya to crab instar?
Okay, so actually that is for hatchery, but I can try to answer that. We are presently, you can use actually the antibiotics, which is a bit safer for aquaculture, and that is oxytetracycline. Although the pyrazolidone gives a better survival, but it may be banned already. So survival from Zoya to crab instar 1 on the average is about 3%, but there are some runs where the Sifda catcher was able to reach about 16%. Thank you.
Thank you po. Next, we have from Risa Chua from Bifar. What's the difference between wild-sourced and hatchery-bred bangus, fry or fingerlings in terms of appearance and performance? There are still fish pond operators who prefer to use wild fry or fingerlings. I think this question is addressed to Mr. Estilo.
Sagutin mo ba? Ako muna. Hello, pwede ba ako muna sumagot? Wala. Lumabas kasi sandali si Mr. Vic Castillo. Ang difference ng fry from the wild saka sa hatchery, mas maigi kung sa hatchery. Kasi ang supply from the wild is unreliable. Unlike kung sa hatchery kukuha, readily available siya. Ang difference ng daw wala naman siyang masyadong difference ng wild sa hatchery milkfish fry. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so actually, Sir Victor Emmanuel Estilo answered this in our chat. And he said, hello, Risa, size variation is a way to distinguish wild-sourced fry from hatchery-bred. Also, the color of the fry will differ, with wild-sourced fry being darker or blackish in color compared to hatchery-bred, which would have lighter color or pigmentation. So I think that answers the question. Let's proceed. From Arnel Nudalo, from Cebu Technological University, San Francisco, Cebu campus. The question is for Sir Vic Estilo. Any feed additive for Pineus monodon you know that can be used for better feed utilization so as to gain higher growth rate and lessen feed cost?
Yes. Hello. Yes. Feed additives come in various purposes or functions. There are feed additives that would introduce microbes into the gut of the animal in order to exclude pathogenic microbes that may be present. There are additives that are used to improve the immune system of the animal. These are immune boosters or stimulants. And there are additives, feed additives, used also to increase levels of some vitamins or to improve feed uptake by elevating the attractant level of the feed. So these additives is for the purpose of not necessarily improving growth, but to achieve all these wide array of parameters like survival, growth, and the survivability of the animals against diseases. So I cannot give you commercial recommendations of these additives, but there there are many in the market that are available. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from July Arines from Surigao City. The question is for Sir Rosenio R. Pagador. Sir, given that it was already found that the remaining extant wild populations of native catfish is already suffering from very low genetic diversity and is elusive as suggested by the study that you have cited earlier, it seems that ex situ conservation and management strategies are the way to go. If reintroductions through captive breeding will be done, what measures can you suggest to implement to prevent genetic contamination and introgression, knowing that captive breeding may also alter the genetic makeup of the fish and may also yield detrimental results?
Okay, I got your question. Thank you. Captive breeding and reintroductions are ex situ conservation and management strategies. The purpose is to increase genetic diversity. Tama yan. Ang captive breeding, how to prevent inbreeding. Ang nangyayari ngayon kasi doon sa dalawang areas na lang na meron ang native catfish, ang grabe ang inbreeding doon sa Cagayan area. Ang manifestation is mga deformities at maliliit. So to prevent inbreeding, one strategy is to get a population probably from Cagayan, then breed with the population from the Agusan. At another way to para hindi ma-increase ang genetic diversity, dapat yung i-reintroduce mo uli yung native catfish in a protected habitat. Ang nangyari doon sa Agusan, meron 'di ba Agusan Marsh? Pero nagkaroon ng sanctuary sa Agusan, 'di ba? Na-establish na sanctuary sa Agusan Marsh. Kaya lang nung na-implement yung nagkaroon ng in-establish yung sanctuary, ang status ng native catfish doon ay naapektuhan na siya. Too late na yung establishment ng sanctuary doon, establishment ng sanctuary doon sa Agusan Marsh. So pwede, kapag sinabi ko kanina, get population, meron din sa Ligwasan Marsh, pwede siguro kumuha ng native catfish doon at breed doon sa either sa Cagayan or sa Agusan. Thank you.
Thank you po. Next, we have from Arnulfo B. Junio from Don Mariano Marcos Memorial State University in La Union. We are interested to culture pompano. Where could we buy its fingerlings?
Don Mariano Marcos Pompano.
So like what I have said earlier, the most advisable um, uh, source of your fry usually is the one nearest your place. Kasi po, masyadong costly po yung transport if you take it from, like for example, dito po sa seat deck. So you will pay for transport, packing materials. So if malayo po yung destination, we usually adjust the loading density. So the longer the transport duration, so we'll lower the loading density para po makasurvive po yung ating fish. So it's still best po na you will source your fry from the place nearest your region to prevent high mortalities during transport. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have from Apple Grade D. Alio from UP Visayas Miagao Campus. The question is for Sir Estilo. How to ensure survival of cultured milkfish during sampling in ponds? Is it advisable to conduct sampling of milkfish in ponds during this rainy season?
Yes, thank you for that question. Most commercial growers of milkfish have trained eyes, so to speak, that they can gauge the average body weight of the fish based on the size of the animal. Meaning, every time they change water, the fish would naturally get attracted by the current and would congregate at the pond gates, and without intervention or without capture methods, they can estimate the size of fish as 3:1, 4:1, or 5:1. And that gives them a rough estimate of the average body weight of their animals. In our case, we want to be more exact, and we do sampling on a regular basis, at least once a month, just to make sure that the adjustment of the feed that is given is on point. So there is no means for us to determine milkfish, the amount of feeds that the milkfish can consume, unlike in shrimps, like I said earlier, where we use feeding trays. So in milkfish, it's more like an ad libitum method of feeding. By sampling, what we do is we use a seine and catch about 100, and these are weighed in mass, and right there in the pond, and take the whole biomass and divide that by the number of fish. This is done quite fast. Now it takes only about, the catching takes longer than the actual sampling. So yes, you can have a choice to do actual sampling or to just do ocular observation on the size of the fish. But I suggest to do actual sampling, and with good handling, we haven't observed any mortalities. And even in the absence of any sedative, we were able to come up with accurate estimates of our average body weight. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Ramonito Cabasan Jr. from Davao del Norte. May available na po bang booklet or journal about native catfish seed production ang CEFDEC? And if meron po, how can they avail of it po?
Thank you for that question. in demand ang catfish Especially ngayon
Yes
na
po, sir.
inintroduce ko tong native catfish. Kasi naging hingalo na talaga ang native catfish. Meron kami na-produce na 2 extension manuals specifically on native catfish. Pinakita ko kanina, breeding and seed production manual saka growout manual. Unfortunately, out of print na. So, siguro kung ganito maraming mga nagre-request, baka magpa-print uli kami. Pero meron kaming, we have a library, online public access. Pwede sila makahingi siguro ng PDF nitong 2 manuals na produce namin on seed production sa grow out. And we also have another flyer. Balikin ng bind na seed production sa grow out. Flyer na pwedeng ma-download for free. Thank you very much for that question.
Thank you very much, sir. Next question we have from Miriam Mondiado. We have technology adapters on producing pompano. If there is any, where? I think she is asking if there are existing technology adapters, if where to find existing technology adapters on producing pompano.
For pompano, usually those that are very interested for this species are those growing in fish cages, and also some are the fish farmers yung pinaka consistent po yung mga farmers na meron post-harvest facilities kasi wala silang problema sa disposal. Yun po.
Thank you, ma'am. I think mag-follow-up question lang tayo for the benefit of the general public since the pompano market is accepted na in the Philippines. So at present, what are the potentials of pompano for market abroad?
Pompano, US and maganda yung potential from countries in the US and Canada and some parts of Europe.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Okay. So we have another question from Gerald Gamo. Like tilapia, was there any case na pwede i-crossbreed ang catfishes? So he was asking po if there are instances na pwedeng i-crossbreed po ang catfishes daw.
Yes, marami. Thank you very much for the question. Pwede cross ang tilapia, ang catfish din, katulad ng sa tilapia. Kaya lang, kung mag-cross breeding, I suggest na yung sa location lang. Ayokong mag-cross ng katulad ng ginagawa sa Thailand. They cross the female native catfish with the male African catfish. Kasi magiging problema later kung mga may escapees, madodominate nila yung sa population. Katulad nung nangyari dito sa atin na inintroduce yung Thai catfish saka African catfish. Binuli yung ating native catfish, nawala yung ating native catfish. Kung magko-cross ka, ang gusto ko yung different native catfish sa lugar ng Cagayan native catfish sa Liguasan Marsh or sa Agusan Marsh. Pero hindi yung say native catfish cross with an African catfish. Kasi ang malaki impact nun sa environment. Thank you very much.
Okay po, thank you po. I have a question po for Dr. Estepa. Since one of the problems in crab culture is the source of crablets, we remembered SEFDEC having a hatchery and was able to successfully produce. So is the hatchery po open na po ba for public?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yung hatchery po ng SEFDEC po, open na po siya for public in case na may gustong bumili ng crabs po, crablets?
Okay. You just contact our SIFDEC and schedule a visit to the crab hatchery. Now, but we also have short-term training courses every year for production of crab seeds. So they can always participate in that course. Thank you.
Thank you po. So we have another question from Jane Pauline Bedjok from Cebu Technological University. Can I ask any suggestion from Sir Pagador on management of catfish in concrete tanks? Kasi we have tried to rear in tanks, pero we encounter very high mortality. This is our first time to culture it in tank.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Talagang grabe tanong sa catfish. Oo. As I've said a while ago during my presentation, catfish, lalo na kung nasa concrete tanks, very cannibalistic. So kailangan mo nang maglagay ng mga substrates. Say yung mga used old nets or pipes para minimize ang cannibalism. And dahil nga aggressive sila, lalo na kapag open, no? So dapat covered gid, dark gid ang tangke, preferably dark din ang color ng tangke. Covered siya to minimize cannibalism. Tapos importante rin pagkain, nutrition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have from Richard Rivera from Don Mariano Marcos Memorial State University in La Union. Is it profitable to commercial feed in crab culture? I think this is addressed to Dr. Estepa.
Again, please, sorry.
He is asking is it profitable to use commercial feed in crab culture po?
Yes, it would be profitable to use commercial feeds. So actually, in the past, there was one company which produced the feeds for growout of crabs. However, the demand was not that much, so they could not operate at even break even to just to accommodate that amount of request. SIFTEC has actually also come out with good formulated feed containing about 43 to 45% protein, and this was tested in a study which is funded by the DOST, Picamart. So I would say, yes, it would be profitable to use commercial feeds, but this has to be, many would need to use this feed so that the commercial feed millers can be able to produce. Thank you.
We have another question from Dr. Estepa from Ernesto del Rosario from Mariano Marcos State University. Why is it that crab hatcheries could not support the demand of crab growers? What could be the problem in hatchery production of crabs?
Right now, there are still a few crab hatcheries, one in Luzon, in Quezon, one in Camarines, in Surigao, in Palawan, and then the Sifda catcher, and also in Gimban. So I don't think that could really support the demand from all of the crab growers in the country, since many are already also growing crabs. So right now, one of the problems for the hatchery is the supply of broodstock. So right now, we have problems on mortalities in broodstock upon arrival and after weeks in the hatchery. So that is still being addressed right now. The suspect before that, the mortalities were caused by a dinoflagellate hematodinium. But lately, they were not able to find high concentrations of these dinoflagellates in mortalities of broodstock. So that is why some of the hatcheries could not also operate at their optimal level or maximum level because of this problem. Thank you.
Thank you po, Dr. Estepa. We have another question from Andre Emmanuel S. Andia from the University of Northern Philippines. Is it possible to join or volunteer workshop to gain more knowledge in handling fishes and crustaceans, since I am very interested in aquaculture?
Volunteer internship.
Volunteer internship.
Hello. I'll answer that question because nasa training and information division ako. Yes, we accept interns, but at the moment, because of travel restrictions, medyo yan ang problema. Yes, we do accept interns. Volunteers, yes, we do accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We have a question from Ma'am Fides Faustino from DOST Antique. The question is for Sir Pagador. Do we have available native catfish fingerlings at SEFDEC for those who are interested in native catfish breeding or hatchery? I am located in Antique.
Maraming salamat po at nagkaroon kayo ng interest sa native catfish. Unfortunately, sa ngayon, wala pa kaming native catfish fry. We are still constructing our freshwater hatchery na kasama na culture ang native catfish. Kaya nga ang problema namin ngayon is saan kami kukuha ng mga native catfish breeders na gagamitin namin. Kailangan namin ng tulong ng BFAR para makakuha kami ng mga native catfish breeders na gagamitin namin for breeding and induced spawning. Thank you very much.
There is another question, sir, to Sir Pagador from Eleanor Rivera. Is cannibalism common to all species of catfish?
Tama po yan. It is common not only to catfish, pati yung mga high-value species, mga grouper, snapper, may cannibalism din. Sa catfish, ganun din. Cannibalism din. Ang malaking problema. I hope I answered that question. Is that all for?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank
From
you.
Apple Gray Alio from UPV Miagao. The question is for Sir Estilo. Is it advisable to conduct sampling of milkfish in ponds during this rainy season?
Can you please repeat the question?
Um,
Is it
is it advisable to conduct sampling of milkfish in ponds during this rainy season?
is it advisable to?
Conduct sampling of
Conduct
milkfish
sampling
during
of
rainy season.
milkfish.
Oh, yeah. The purpose of sampling is to give us an estimate on the growth of the fish. So, regardless of the season, if the requirement is present for us to determine exactly the growth of the fish, then we need to devise or modify our sampling methods to conform with the season, whether it's dry season or wet season. You can handle fish more roughly during the wet season, where the weather temperatures are quite cooler compared to the summer months. So I think that's a matter of sampling technique. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think that's the last question for today. Oh, we have one for Dr. Estepa. This is from Mary Beth Irigo. If we have an area for crab grow out, what assistance do you give for us to survive?
If you have an area for grow out, which means that you have not yet started crab culture, so perhaps you can ask for assistance from CIFDEC on site assessment and evaluation, which is very important. And when you are already culturing, if you have some problems like diseases, then you can always contact CIFDEC for assistance, and you can bring in some samples and it could be analyzed here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And then we have a follow-up question again for catfish. I do have an area. What assistance can they give us? I am from CAFC, chairman of Mati City.
Yes, we will provide assistance. In terms, pwede hatchery, seed production, nursery hanggang grow out. We can provide assistance. Sa training course, we have this training course on freshwater aquaculture. Kaya lang venue nito sa Binangonan Freshwater Station na ginatackle ang culture ng catfish from breeding to hatchery up to grow out. Kasama rin din, may nutrition doon. Pwede siyang, pero sa ngayon dahil may COVID-19 hindi kami makakonduct ng on-site training. Katulad ng sabi ko yun na nagde-develop kami ng online training course. Sana matapos namin as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And we have another question. My question po is again addressed to Sir Pagador. Sir, US has now been successful in producing sterile hybrid blue and channel catfish. Is it possible din po ba to produce a sterile hybrid using our native and African catfish here in the Philippines, given the desirable traits that the offspring might inherit from each parent species?
Thank you very much for that question. Unang-una, ayaw po namin mag-introduce naman ng catfish, ibang catfish dito sa Pilipinas. Nasira na nga ang ating native catfish because of the introduction of the Thai and the African. Tapos meron pa nga tayong pangasius din. Tapos dadagdagan pa natin itong channel catfish. Tapos iko-crossbreed. Dami nating problema. Paano natin masosolve? Hindi, ayaw. Sa tingin ko, hindi dapat natin payagan tong ganito. Thank you very much.
Okay po. Thank you very much, sir. We have another question from Elsie Giboni. Any suggestion from Dr. Estepa on possible management strategies if we intend to grow Sila olivacea in pond, or any culture method or practice for olivacea na madami po sa Mindoro?
For Sila olivacea, that is why this is not being grown by farmers. It's because they burrow into the dikes, and you will always experience some seepages if you use that species. So if there is a way that you could stop this species from damaging the dikes, then you can culture Sila olivacea. Also, this species, according to some operators, which had just some wild Sila olivacea going into their ponds, and then this species also tends to go out from the ponds, and especially when they are already mature. So sorry, but right now I could not recommend any strategy yet for culturing olivacea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think that's the last question for today, no? So for other questions, we apologize if some of your questions cannot be accommodated due to time constraints. But for those questions, you can request technical assistance through the OST's One Expert. So they can contact the experts through One Expert portal. So anyway, you may contact the following offices. You may contact the Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center in their official webpage or in their official Facebook account if you have other questions. So posted on the screen is also the link to the evaluation form. We hope that all of the participants can take time to send us feedback before leaving the webinar. We greatly appreciate it. In behalf of the DOST Region 6, thank you very much to CEFDEC Aquaculture Department Chief, Mr. Dandy Balyao, and to CEFDEC as a whole for accepting our request, and to the speakers, the experts in their field, for sharing new and innovative technologies and practices. Thank you to all the participants and viewers. For the next webinars, we have the official Facebook account. It's at DOST Region 6. It's on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we have the official One Expert Facebook page. It's at One Expert PH. You may follow our pages to be updated. So that ends our webinar for today. Being resilient is to see opportunity in times of adversity. Keep safe, everyone. And again, madamo gid nga salamat.